On the day my Ice Queen CEO got married, I quit my job and went home to go on a blind date. She stopped me in her wedding dress and said, "My groom, where are you going?" For 3 years, Ethan Cole had loved his CEO in silence. Not the kind of love that demanded an answer. Not the kind that expected anything back. Just quiet, stubborn, hopeless love. He knew exactly how Clara Whitmore liked her coffee. Hot, no sugar, a little cinnamon when it rained. He knew she skipped lunch before board meetings. He knew she hated being touched by strangers. He knew she was afraid of thunder, though she would rather die than admit it. He knew that when she looked coldest, she was usually the most tired. And he knew one more thing. Clara Whitmore would never love him. She was the youngest CEO in Whitmore Group history. Beautiful, brilliant, untouchable, and he was only her executive assistant. So, when the company announced her engagement, Ethan did what any sensible man would do. He resigned. The engagement news appeared on every business website that morning. Whitmore Group CEO Clara Whitmore announces engagement to heir of Langford Capital. The photo showed Clara standing beside Daniel Langford, a handsome man in a gray suit. They looked perfect together. Powerful family, perfect background, perfect match. Ethan stared at the screen for exactly 10 seconds. Then he closed the page, opened a blank document, and typed his resignation letter. At 5:40 p.m., he walked into Clara's office. She was still reviewing contracts by the window. The sunset fell across her white blouse, softening the sharpness of her profile. For one foolish second, Ethan almost changed his mind. Then he remembered the headline. He placed the envelope on her desk. "Ms. Whitmore." Clara looked up. "What is this?" "My resignation." The office became very quiet. Her fingers stopped turning the page for 3 seconds. She said nothing. Then, she picked up the envelope and opened it. Her eyes moved across the page. Calm. Too calm. Ethan lowered his gaze. "My handover files are complete. Mia knows all the schedules. I'll stay until Friday if needed." Clara looked at the last line, then at his signature. "Why?" He smiled faintly. "I'm tired of work, of pretending." Her eyes changed slightly. "Pretending what?" He did not answer because he had no right to. No right to say he loved her. No right to say he had stayed beside her for 3 years because leaving felt impossible. No right to say her engagement had finally taught him where he stood. So, he only said, "Congratulations on your engagement." Clara froze. The pen in her hand stopped moving. Ethan continued quietly. "I hope you'll be happy." For the first time in 3 years, Clara Whitmore looked confused, not angry, not cold, confused. But Ethan did not let himself look too long. He bowed slightly. "I'll leave the files with Mia." Then, he turned and walked out. Behind him, Clara did not call his name, not once. That hurt more than he expected. By Friday evening, Ethan had packed everything on his desk. 3 notebooks, 1 fountain pen Clara had once given him after he worked 40 hours without sleep. A spare tie, and a tiny paper cup sleeve from a coffee shop near the company. Clara had written on it once during a rainy night. "Less cinnamon next time." He had kept it like an idiot. Mia, Clara's secretary, watched him silently. "You're really leaving?" Ethan forced a smile. "I already resigned, you know. CEO hasn't accepted it." "Right, she didn't reject it either." Mia hesitated. "She's been strange all week. She's engaged." "That's not it." Ethan closed the box. "It doesn't matter anymore." Mia looked at him like she wanted to shake him awake. But before she could speak, the elevator doors opened. Clara stepped out. The entire executive floor went silent. She was wearing a black dress under a long beige coat. Her hair was tied up. Her expression was calm. Too calm. She walked directly toward Ethan. Everyone lowered their heads and pretended not to watch. Ethan held the box tighter. "Ms. Whitmore." Clara looked at the box in his arms, then at his empty desk. "You packed everything." "Yes." "You deleted your access card. It expires tonight." "You transferred all files to Mia." "That's standard procedure." "You canceled the apartment lease near the company." Ethan paused. "How did you know that?" She did not answer. Instead, she asked, "Where are you going?" "Back home." "For how long?" "I don't know." "To do what?" He looked away. "My mother arranged a date for me." The temperature on the executive floor seemed to drop. Clara's eyes narrowed. "A date?" "Yes." "With whom?" "Someone from my hometown." "Do you like her?" "That doesn't matter." "It matters to me." Ethan laughed quietly. For the first time, his voice carried pain. "Why?" Clara did not answer immediately. He looked at her. "Why does it matter now?" Her fingers tightened around the folder in her hand. Ethan lowered his voice. "You're engaged, Ms. Whitmore." The words finally broke something. Clara stared at him. Then she asked slowly, "So that's why you resigned?" He said nothing. Her eyes reddened faintly, but her voice stayed calm. "You saw the news." "Yes." "You believed it." "Was it false?" She took one step closer. "It was an engagement announcement." "I know. To announce a marriage alliance." "I know. With the Langford family." "I know." Her voice suddenly turned colder. "Then who told you the groom was Daniel Langford?" Ethan froze. The entire executive floor froze with him. Mia's eyes widened. Clara took another step closer. Her voice was still steady, but every word struck his heart. "You resigned because you thought I was marrying someone else." Ethan stared at her. "What do you mean?" Clara looked at him as if he had personally driven her insane. "What do I mean?" She suddenly reached for the resignation letter in Mia's hand, tore it in half, then tore it again and again. White paper fell like snow between them. Ethan forgot how to breathe. Clara stood in front of him, eyes bright with anger and something much softer. "You're leaving?" Her voice trembled for the first time. "Then who am I supposed to marry?" The executive floor exploded. Someone dropped a coffee cup. Someone gasped. Mia covered her mouth. Ethan stood completely still. "What?" Clara stepped closer until the torn pieces of his resignation letter lay between their shoes. "I waited 3 years for you to look at me." Her eyes were no longer cold. They were hurt. "You worked beside me every day. You remembered my coffee, my schedule, my medicine, my bad habits, but you never remembered one thing." Ethan's voice was hoarse. "What?" Clara looked up at him. "That I kept choosing you." His heart slammed against his ribs. "You never said anything. You never asked. I didn't think I had the right." Her voice softened, "And I didn't think you wanted one." For a long moment, neither spoke. All the misunderstandings of 3 years stood between them, thin as paper, heavy as mountains. Then Clara took one final step. She lifted her hand, not to touch him, only to hold the edge of the box in his arms. As if afraid that if she let go, he would really disappear. Ethan Cole. He looked at her. The CEO everyone feared, the woman he had loved for 3 impossible years. She looked at him now with a vulnerability no one else had ever seen. "You can go back home if you want. You can take your box. You can leave this company." Her voice dropped, but before you do, she looked straight into his eyes. "At least tell me, do you really want me to marry someone else?" Ethan's fingers tightened around the box. The answer came from the deepest, most honest part of him. "No." Clara's eyes softened instantly. "Good." She took the box from his arms and handed it to Mia. Then she grabbed Ethan's wrist. Everyone watched in shock as the Ice Queen CEO pulled her former assistant toward the private elevator. Ethan finally found his voice. "Ms. Whitmore." She pressed the elevator button without looking back. "Clara." "What?" She turned. Her eyes were still red. Her grip on his wrist was firm. "If you're going to be my groom." The elevator doors opened. She pulled him inside. "Start calling me Clara." The doors closed. Outside, the entire executive floor remained silent for 3 seconds. Then Mia looked at the torn resignation letter on the floor. She smiled and typed one message into the company group chat. "Breaking news, CEO found her runaway groom." The elevator doors closed. For the first time in 3 years, Ethan and Clara were completely alone. Neither spoke. The only sound came from the soft hum of the private elevator rising toward the executive penthouse. Ethan finally broke the silence. Clara. She looked at him immediately. His heart skipped. He had never called her by her first name before, not once. She smiled without realizing it. Say it again. He blinked. What? My name. He laughed softly. You've waited 3 years for that? I've waited longer. The answer made him pause. The elevator stopped. The doors slid open. Instead of leading him toward the executive office, Clara walked into the private rooftop garden above the building. The city stretched beneath them. The evening lights had just begun to glow. It was quiet, almost peaceful. Ethan frowned. I've never been here. I know. It's beautiful. I had it built. He looked around. There are roses. You like roses. His expression slowly changed. How do you know? She looked at him as though it were the most obvious thing in the world. You stopped outside Rosewood Florist every Friday. You never bought any. You only looked. He stared. You knew that? I know more than you think. She walked toward a wooden bench overlooking the skyline, then sat down for the first time. She looked nervous. Ethan. I'm going to tell you something. If you laugh, I'll fire you. He couldn't help smiling. I already resigned, right? She sighed. I forgot. For a few seconds, she simply looked at the city. Then she began. The engagement announcement was never about Daniel. He frowned. The media? The media assumed. We never corrected them. Why? Because my grandfather wanted to force me. Force you to admit who I wanted. She looked at him. It worked. Ethan blinked. What? You resigned. He laughed helplessly. So, I ruined your plan. No. She smiled softly. You accelerated it. She reached into her handbag carefully, slowly, then placed a dark blue notebook on the bench between them. It looked old. The leather corners had become worn. The pages had obviously been opened countless times. What is this? My diary. He looked surprised. You want me to read it? I want you to know. She opened to the very first page. The date read, 3 years ago. Beneath it, one sentence. Today, my new assistant arrived. Ethan smiled awkwardly. I looked terrible that day. You did. You wore a tie that didn't match your suit. I know. You spilled coffee before the interview. You knew. I watched. He looked at her. You were watching. I always watch. She turned another page. Another entry. He stayed until midnight because I skipped dinner again. Another. He thinks I didn't notice he put a blanket over me while I was asleep. Another. He smiles at everyone except himself. Another. I wish he'd stopped calling me Miss Whitmore. Ethan stopped breathing. Every page had his name. Sometimes only one sentence. Sometimes several. Some pages simply read, he looked tired today. Others, he remembered I hate thunderstorms. Or, he smiled today. I think that's enough to make this a good day. His fingers trembled slightly as he turned another page. Then another. The diary contained 3 full years of him. Nothing else. He looked up slowly. I know. It's embarrassing. No. His voice shook. It's impossible. I thought so, too. She looked at the final page. Yesterday's date. Only one sentence had been written. He resigned today. Below it, the ink had smeared slightly as though someone had cried before it dried. Ethan gently touched the page. You cried. She looked away. A little. You never cry. I do. She smiled sadly. Just not where anyone can see. He closed the diary carefully. So, I wasn't imagining things. What things? You always remembered my birthday. She nodded. You always waited for me after meetings. She nodded again. You kept asking whether I'd eaten. I did. You knew I liked cinnamon. I bought every brand in the city. He laughed in disbelief. You really did. She folded her hands together. I wasn't very good at loving someone. I only knew how to remember. His heart ached. 3 years. While he thought he had been secretly loving her, she had been quietly collecting pieces of him. Every habit, every preference, every smile. Neither of them had realized the other had been doing exactly the same thing. Ethan, can I ask you something? Anything. When did you fall in love with me? He smiled. The second week. She blinked. So soon? You were working all night. I brought coffee. You thanked every employee personally before drinking yours. She frowned. I don't remember. I do. He looked toward the city lights. I thought if someone as successful as you could still be that kind, then I was already in trouble. She laughed. What about you? When did you fall? She looked at him quietly. First day. He stared. Impossible. You held the elevator. That's all. You apologized because your shoes were wet. He laughed. I remember. You looked terrified I'd dirty the carpet. I really was. She smiled warmly. No one had ever apologized to me for bringing rain into my office. The rooftop grew quieter as evening settled. A cool breeze brushed past. Without thinking, Ethan removed his suit jacket. He draped it over Clara's shoulders. She looked at him. You still do that. You still forget it's cold. She smiled. I knew you'd notice. You did it on purpose. Maybe. He laughed. So, the famous CEO plays tricks, too. Only on one person. She stood, walked until they were standing face to face. The city lights reflected in her eyes. Ethan. I have one more confession. I'm listening. I never wanted a business marriage. I guessed. I only announced the engagement because she looked directly into his eyes. I wanted someone to finally ask me not to marry another man. His chest tightened. I thought you'd stop me. He smiled helplessly. I almost ran away instead. I noticed. I was very stupid. She nodded seriously. You were. They both laughed. The years of misunderstandings suddenly seemed almost ridiculous. After a moment, Clara slowly reached into her coat pocket. She pulled out a small velvet ring box. Ethan froze. This. She opened it. Inside were two simple platinum rings. Not flashy, not expensive by her standards, but engraved inside each band. One read, C. Whitmore. The other, E. Cole. I bought them 6 months ago. His eyes widened. You were that confident? No. She smiled. Honestly, I was that hopeful. A long silence followed. Then Ethan looked at her, the woman who had quietly loved him through 3 years of ordinary days. The woman who had nearly lost him because neither of them had spoken first. He took the ring gently from the box. Then instead of putting it on immediately, he held her hand, warm, slightly trembling, just like his. Clara. Yes, I think we owe ourselves something. What? A proper beginning. She smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. At that exact moment, the rooftop door burst open. Mia stood there completely out of breath. Cole. She stopped, looked at the rings, looked at their joint hands, then slowly turned around. I'll pretend I didn't interrupt anything. Clara laughed. Too late. Mia sighed dramatically. I've postponed 3 meetings. 4 investors are waiting. And your grandfather just called asking whether the engagement is still happening. Clara looked at Ethan then smiled. It is. Mia blinked. Really? Clara intertwined her fingers with Ethan's. The groom just changed. By 9 o'clock the next morning, everyone at Whitmore Group had heard the rumor. No, not a rumor anymore, a confirmed fact. The mysterious groom in the CEO's engagement announcement was no longer Daniel Langford. It was Ethan Cole. The former executive assistant, the man who had resigned, the man the CEO had personally chased into the private elevator. The company's internal chat had completely exploded. Finance department, did anyone actually see them together? Legal department, Mia confirmed it. Marketing department, CEO smiled this morning. Everyone impossible. Ethan arrived at work 20 minutes earlier than usual. Old habits, he still carried 2 coffees, one for himself, one for Clara. He stopped halfway across the lobby. Wait, he laughed at himself. I don't work here anymore. Just then, the receptionist stood up. Good morning, Mr. Cole. He smiled politely. Morning. The CEO asked us to tell you something. What? Please stop using the employee entrance. He frowned. Why? The CEO said. The receptionist tried very hard not to smile. Her fiancé shouldn't sneak into his own company. Ethan rubbed his forehead. She's enjoying this too much. The receptionist whispered, we all think so. The private elevator opened directly into the executive floor. Before Ethan even stepped out, someone hugged him. He froze. So did everyone else, because the person hugging him was Clara Whitmore, the CEO, in front of 40 executives. She buried her face lightly against his shoulder. You're late. He looked at the clock. I'm 8 minutes early. I know. So I've been waiting 8 minutes. The executives exchanged horrified looks. The legendary Ice Queen was complaining because her fiancé arrived early instead of earlier. Ethan lowered his voice. You know, everyone is watching. I know. Shouldn't we let go? She looked up at him. Do you want me to? He smiled helplessly. No. Good. She naturally slipped her hand into his. Come with me. The executives silently moved aside. Nobody dared interrupt. Nobody even dared breathe too loudly. The morning board meeting began. Daniel Langford was already waiting. He stood when Clara entered. So, he smiled. I finally get to meet the man who stole my fiancée. The room instantly became awkward. Ethan immediately replied. I think I owe you an apology. Daniel laughed. You don't. He walked over. Extended his hand. I've known Clara since childhood. Ethan shook it. I'm Ethan. I know. Daniel looked between them, then sighed dramatically. You know what the funniest part is? What? I spent 3 years trying to impress her. He pointed toward Ethan, and she spent those same 3 years asking me whether your workload was too heavy. The room burst into laughter. Ethan turned slowly toward Clara. You? She looked away innocently. I was concerned. Daniel laughed louder. No. You were in love. Clara's ears turned slightly pink. I wasn't that obvious. Daniel and Mia answered together. You were. Halfway through the meeting, an elderly board member suddenly spoke. Ms. Whitmore. Clara looked over. I have one concern. Please. Mr. Cole has no executive title. How will the company introduce him publicly? Several directors nodded. It was a reasonable question. Ethan spoke first. I don't need a title. I'm happy staying behind the scenes. Before anyone else could respond, Clara closed her folder. You do. He looked at her. She continued calmly. He won't be returning as my assistant. I never asked to. I know. She smiled. I'm asking you to become my partner. The room fell completely silent. She stood, walked around the table, stopped beside Ethan, then looked toward every director. For 3 years, he helped me build this company. He solved problems no one else even noticed. He worked until sunrise without asking for credit. He protected my reputation, my health, my trust. She reached for his hand. So today, I'd like to make something equally clear. Her voice remained gentle, but every word carried absolute certainty. He isn't standing behind me anymore. She looked at Ethan. He'll stand beside me. Applause slowly began. One director, then another. Soon, the entire boardroom was applauding. Not because the CEO ordered them to, because they had all seen it. The way Ethan looked at Clara, the way Clara looked back. Neither of them had ever hidden love very well. They had simply hidden it from each other. That afternoon, Clara insisted on eating lunch in the company cafeteria. Mia looked horrified. The executive dining room is available. I know. So I want lunch with everyone. Employees immediately pretended not to notice when the CEO walked in. Unfortunately, they failed very badly. Clara carried her tray toward an empty table. Ethan followed. Before they sat down, Clara quietly picked every piece of bell pepper out of his lunch. He blinked. You remembered. You hate bell peppers. I've never told you. You don't have to. Across the cafeteria, someone whispered, "Did CEO just pick vegetables out of his food?" Another employee answered, "I think we're witnessing history." Ethan smiled, "You will spoil me." Clara looked at him with complete seriousness. "I intend to." He laughed, "You say things like that in public now? I've waited 3 years. She picked up another piece of bell pepper. "I'm done waiting." That evening, as the employees left work, they saw something unusual. The CEO's office lights were still on. So were Ethan's. And the intern guessed they're still working. Mia smiled knowingly, "They are." The intern looked impressed. "They're such a hard-working couple." Mia laughed, "They finished work 40 minutes ago." "What? So why?" Mia looked through the glass wall toward the office. Inside, Ethan was teaching Clara how to make coffee using a small pour-over set he brought from home. She frowned at the kettle. "This is harder than negotiating acquisitions." "It is. You've made this look easy for years." "I practiced." She looked up. "For me?" "For us." She smiled, then carefully poured the hot water again, this time perfectly. Ethan took a sip. "Much better." She looked unexpectedly pleased. "So, my first cup passes." He nodded, "It tastes like home." Clara looked at the coffee in her hands, then back at him. "No." She smiled softly, "You do." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside the office, Mia quietly turned off the hallway lights. The intern whispered, "Shouldn't we tell them we're leaving?" Mia gently closed the office door instead. "No." "Why?" She smiled, "They've already waited 3 years. They deserve a little overtime together." 1 week later, Whitmore Group officially announced its annual Global Innovation Summit. More than 300 business leaders, international investors, media from 12 countries. It was the company's largest event of the year. And for Clara, it would also be the first public appearance after changing her fiancé. Every business magazine wanted one photograph. The Ice Queen CEO and the mysterious man who had somehow won her heart. Backstage, stylists hurried in and out. Assistants checked schedules. Mia walked in holding 2 garment bags. The blue gown or the white one? Clara looked at Ethan. He was adjusting his cufflinks in front of the mirror. "What do you think?" He turned around. The white gown was elegant. The blue one made her eyes brighter. He answered honestly, "The blue." She nodded immediately. "The blue it is." Mia blinked. "That's it." Clara smiled. "I already decided." "So?" I asked him. I wanted to hear him say it. Mia sighed dramatically. "I should have known." Half an hour later, the limousine stopped outside the convention center. Thousands of camera flashes lit up the entrance. The car door opened. Every photographer instinctively aimed their camera. Clara stepped out first. The midnight blue gown shimmered beneath the lights. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Then she turned around without waiting for anyone else. She reached one hand back toward the car. Ethan took it. The moment he stepped out, reporters began shouting questions. "Mr. Cole, when is the wedding? Did you know about the engagement in advance? How did you propose?" Before Ethan answered, one reporter squeezed closer. Too close. His microphone almost brushed Ethan's shoulder. Clara's smile disappeared. She calmly stepped sideways, placing herself between Ethan and the crowd. Then she looked directly at security. "Please." The security team immediately understood. A path opened. Only after Ethan had enough space again did Clara continue walking. One photographer captured the entire sequence. Within minutes, the picture spread across social media. The caption read, "She didn't protect herself. She protected him." Inside the ballroom, the summit officially began. Clara delivered the opening speech flawlessly. Confident, elegant, composed, exactly the CEO everyone expected. Ethan watched from the front row. His eyes never left her. Daniel quietly sat beside him. "You know, she searched for you before every sentence." Ethan looked surprised. "What?" "When she's nervous." Daniel smiled. "She always looks for the person she trusts most." Ethan turned back toward the stage just as Clara finished introducing the final guest. Her eyes found his again, only for half a second, but she smiled. A tiny smile, barely noticeable, except to him. He smiled back. She visibly relaxed. Daniel chuckled. Told you. After the keynote speech came the networking reception. Business leaders gathered in small groups. One after another came to congratulate Clara. Then a graceful woman in a silver evening dress approached. She was elegant, confident, and very beautiful. She smiled at Ethan. Mr. Cole. He nodded politely. Good evening. I'm Sophia Bennett. We met once during the Singapore project. I remember. She extended her business card. I've recently started a venture capital fund. I'd love to invite you to dinner to discuss your future. Before Ethan answered, another hand gently took the business card first. Sophia looked up, Clara still smiling, still perfectly polite. Miss Bennett. Sophia laughed lightly. Cole. I hope you don't mind. I'd like to borrow your fiancé for one evening. Clara's smile remained exactly the same. I'm afraid I do mind. Sophia blinked. It's only business. I know. So, Clara looked toward Ethan, then back at Sophia. If you want him, her voice stayed warm, but ask me first. The surrounding conversation stopped almost instantly. Even Daniel nearly choked on his champagne. Sophia laughed in surprise. You really are possessive. Clara answered calmly. Very. She reached for Ethan's hand. Their fingers intertwined naturally. As everyone here already knows, he's my fiancé. She looked at Ethan, and I'm still in my honeymoon phase. The room burst into laughter. Sophia raised both hands and surrendered. I've lost. You definitely have. She smiled toward Ethan. Congratulations. You found someone terrifying. Ethan couldn't help laughing. I think I'm the lucky one. An hour later, the reception finally ended. The ballroom slowly emptied. Clara slipped off her high heels the moment they entered the private lounge. She sighed dramatically. My feet hurt. Ethan crouched in front of her almost immediately. Let me see. She blinked. You don't have to. I know. He gently examined her ankle. The new shoes had rubbed the skin slightly red. His brows knitted together. You should have told me. You were busy. I'm never too busy. He reached into the emergency kit. Mia always prepared a small bandage, antiseptic spray. He worked carefully as though handling something fragile. Clara watched him quietly. You've always done this, Ethan, taking care of me. He smiled faintly. You've always made it easy to want to. She gently brushed a strand of hair away from his forehead. Ethan? Yes? I have another confession. He looked up. When Sophia invited you to dinner, I wasn't actually angry. No, I was scared. He paused. Scared? She nodded. Honestly, for 3 years, I thought loving you silently was enough. It wasn't. She looked into his eyes. So now if someone looks at you, I want the whole world to know you already belong somewhere. Ethan's heart softened. He finished placing the bandage. Then instead of standing immediately, he remained kneeling before her. He took both of her hands. Then let me confess something, too. She smiled. I'm listening. When you stood between me and those reporters, I finally understood something. What? He looked at her with quiet certainty. For 3 years, I thought I was the one protecting you. He gently kissed the back of her hand. But the truth is, you've been protecting me all along. Clara's eyes slowly became misty. She leaned forward, resting her forehead gently against his. Neither spoke. Outside, flashes from the departing media still lit up the night. Inside the lounge, there was only the two of them, safe, close, finally on the same side. Just then, Mia quietly opened the lounge door. She froze. Ethan was still kneeling. Clara's forehead rested against his. Neither had noticed her. Mia slowly closed the door again. The assistant beside her whispered, Should we tell CEO her next interview starts in 5 minutes? Mia looked at the closed door and smiled. No, they've postponed happiness for 3 years. They can postpone one interview for 5 minutes. The Global Innovation Summit ended just before 10 o'clock. Most guests left for after parties. Clara didn't. She still had one final dinner with overseas investors. Ethan stood beside the car. "I'll wait." She looked at him. "It may take hours." "I know. You should go home." "I'll wait." She knew that tone. Once Ethan had made up his mind, no one could change it, not even her. So, she smiled. "Don't skip dinner." "You either." "I'll try." He nodded. "I'll believe it when I see it." She laughed softly before getting back into the car. The business dinner lasted much longer than expected. Negotiations, toasts, presentations. By midnight, everyone looked exhausted. One of the investors raised a glass. CEO Whitmore, one last toast. Clara normally refused alcohol. Tonight, she accepted half a glass, then another. By the time the meeting finally ended, her cheeks carried the faintest blush. Mia whispered carefully, "CEO, you've had enough." "I'm fine." "You just called the French investor, Daniel." Clara frowned. "I did." "You did?" She sighed. "Then maybe I've had enough." Outside the hotel, a cool breeze greeted them. The city was quiet. The streets glistened from an earlier rain. Clara instinctively looked across the driveway. There, beneath the street lamp, stood a familiar figure. Dark coat, hands in his pockets, patient as always. "Ethan." She stopped walking. Mia smiled to herself. "I told him to go home." "He didn't listen." Clara's eyes softened immediately. "He never does." She walked toward him. Each step a little faster than the last. Ethan noticed her unsteady pace and immediately met her halfway. "You drank a little." "You hate drinking." "I know." He gently took her briefcase. Then looked into her eyes. "Tired?" She nodded. "A little hungry?" "Very." He smiled. "I brought something." From the passenger seat of the car, he took out a small insulated bag. Inside was still warm chicken porridge. Exactly the one from the tiny restaurant Clara loved near the office. She looked surprised. "You drove all the way there. You never eat properly after business dinners." She looked down at the container. It was still warm. "You made them stay open?" I asked politely. "You bribed the owner." "Maybe." She couldn't help laughing. Halfway home, Clara became unusually quiet. She rested her head against the window watching the lights pass by. "Ethan." "HM. Can I ask something?" "Anything." "Why do you always wait for me?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he focused on the road. Finally, he spoke. "When I was little, my father worked night shifts. He always told my mother not to wait. But my mother waited anyway." Clara listened quietly. One day, I asked her why. "What did she say?" He smiled faintly. "She said, going home feels different when someone is waiting." Silence filled the car. Clara slowly turned toward him. "So, I wanted you to have that feeling, too." Her eyes suddenly became warm. She looked out of the window again only because she didn't want him to see the tears gathering there. When they reached home, Ethan helped her out of the car. The moment her feet touched the ground, she lost her balance slightly. He caught her immediately. "Easy." She looked up at him for several long seconds without saying anything. "What?" "You smell nice." He laughed. "That's the first thing you say. You always smell like coffee and laundry and home." He froze. Clara covered her mouth. "Did I say that out loud?" "You did." She groaned softly. "I shouldn't drink." "No. You become honest." Inside the house, Ethan reheated the porridge. Clara sat on the kitchen island quietly watching him move around. She had watched him make coffee countless times, prepare breakfast countless mornings, straighten her tie before meetings, adjust her scarf before flights. She suddenly realized this ordinary kitchen scene was happier than every glamorous banquet she'd ever attended. "Ethan, I ate." I think she spoke slowly. Her voice softened by the alcohol. "I've been spoiled." He looked over. "By whom?" She blinked at him. "You." He laughed. "I've only made porridge." "No." She shook her head gently. You remember everything. You wait for me. You worry when I skip meals. You carry extra medicine. You check tomorrow's weather. You make coffee exactly how I like it. She smiled. I don't know how to live without you anymore. The kitchen became very quiet. Ethan placed the spoon down, walked toward her. He stood between her knees close enough that she could see every emotion in his eyes. Then don't. She looked up. What? Don't live without me. His voice was calm, steady, certain. Let me stay for every late meeting, every early morning, every bad day, every ordinary Tuesday, and every year after that. Clara's eyes filled completely. You make it sound so simple. It is. He gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I don't want grand promises. I just want to keep coming home with you. She smiled through tears. I think I love ordinary days with you more than extraordinary ones. He smiled back. So do I. The porridge was forgotten. The kitchen lights remained on. Outside, rain began falling again, soft, gentle, almost exactly like the day they first met. Clara suddenly leaned forward, very carefully, very slowly. She wrapped both arms around Ethan's waist. He immediately hugged her back. No hesitation, no surprise, only warmth. After a long silence, she whispered, Ethan? Yes? If I have another business dinner, will you still wait for me? He smiled against her hair. I'll always wait. She closed her eyes, satisfied, safe. Then she murmured sleepily, good, because coming home only feels like home when you're there. Ethan held her a little tighter. Outside the kitchen window, the rain continued to fall. Inside the warm house, neither of them noticed the newest message lighting up the executive group chat. Daily observation number 12. CEO attended the most expensive dinner in the city, then came home and ate porridge made by her fiancé. Conclusion, love apparently tastes better than Michelin stars. Winter arrived earlier than expected. The first snow covered the city overnight. When Ethan woke, the apartment was unusually quiet. He walked into the kitchen. No Clara. The coffee machine hadn't been used. He frowned. Clara? No answer. Just as he reached for his phone, the bedroom door opened. Clara stepped out wearing one of his oversized sweaters. Her long hair was still slightly damp. She smiled sheepishly. I wanted to surprise you. He let out a quiet breath. You almost gave me a heart attack. I only slept in. You've never slept past 7. I was tired. He walked over without another word. His palm rested lightly against her forehead. No fever. Then he touched her cheek. Still warm. Only then did he relax. Clara watched him quietly. You always check my temperature first. I always will. She reached up and held his wrist. I like that. He smiled. I know. That afternoon, Mia rushed into Clara's office. CEO, what happened? The Whitmore family has announced tonight's engagement banquet. Clara looked up from the contract. They announced it. Yes. They're expecting you. Ethan frowned. But the engagement was cancelled. Mia nodded. They don't know. They're trying to save face. Clara closed the file slowly. They're inviting Daniel. Too. The room fell silent. After a moment, Ethan spoke. We don't have to go. Clara looked at him. We're going. You don't owe anyone an explanation. I know. She smiled gently. But you deserve one. The Whitmore Grand Hotel glittered beneath crystal chandeliers. Nearly every influential family in the city had arrived. The moment Clara entered, whispers spread through the ballroom. She's here. Where's Daniel? Who's the man beside her? Ethan wore a simple black suit, elegant, calm, never trying to compete with anyone. Yet, somehow, every time Clara glanced at him, everyone else disappeared. At the center of the ballroom stood Clara's grandfather, Chairman Henry Whitmore. He looked at Ethan, then at Clara. You came. I said I would. Daniel has arrived. I know. The chairman sighed. You've embarrassed 2 families. Clara remained calm. No, I corrected one mistake. The old man frowned. You still have time. Apologize. Continue the engagement. I'll pretend none of this happened. The ballroom became completely silent. Everyone waited for Clara's answer. She looked at Ethan, then smiled. I'm afraid that's impossible. Why? Because she slowly reached for Ethan's hand. I'm already in love with someone else. Daniel walked over at that exact moment. Instead of looking angry, he smiled. I suppose this is my cue. Several guests looked confused. Daniel laughed. I've been trying to explain for a week. No one wanted to believe me. He turned toward the chairman. Grandpa Whitmore, I was never the groom. The chairman froze. What? Daniel shrugged. I agreed to the announcement because Clara begged me. Everyone stared at Clara. She looked slightly embarrassed. I needed someone to make one stubborn man jealous. Daniel pointed directly at Ethan. Congratulations. It worked. The ballroom erupted into laughter. Even Ethan couldn't help covering his face. So, I resigned because of your plan. Clara nodded honestly. Yes. You almost lost me. I know. I'm very sorry. He sighed dramatically. You really are impossible. She smiled, but you still came back. I always would. The chairman looked from one young face to another, then slowly shook his head. So, I've been arguing with the wrong grandson-in-law. Daniel burst into laughter. Exactly. The old man looked at Ethan for several long seconds, then finally asked, Young man, do you love my granddaughter? Ethan answered immediately, yes. Can you make her happy? I'll spend the rest of my life trying. The old man's expression softened almost invisibly. Then he looked at Clara. And you? She smiled. I already am. Music quietly began again. Guests relaxed. The tension disappeared just as everyone thought the evening was over. Clara suddenly let go of Ethan's hand. She walked toward the small stage, picked up the microphone. The ballroom gradually fell silent once more. She looked directly at Ethan. For 3 years, I waited for him to tell me he loved me. He never did. Laughter echoed softly. So, I decided waiting isn't my style anymore. She stepped down from the stage, walked across the ballroom until she stood directly in front of Ethan. Then, to everyone's astonishment, the famous Ice Queen CEO knelt on one knee. Gasps echoed through the hall. Ethan's eyes widened. Clara. She opened a small velvet box. Inside lay the 2 platinum rings, the same rings she had bought 6 months earlier. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, from hope. Ethan Cole, you once resigned because you thought I was marrying someone else. He smiled helplessly. I remember. So, let me make this perfectly clear. She looked up at him. There was no CEO, no billionaire, no untouchable businesswoman, only a woman deeply in love. I don't want a business marriage. I don't want a political marriage. I don't want anyone else. I only want you. She took a slow breath, then asked the question she'd rehearsed 100 times in front of her bedroom mirror. So, will you marry me properly? The ballroom became so quiet that everyone could hear Ethan's breathing. His eyes were already red. He slowly knelt in front of her, not above her, beside her. He gently closed the ring box, then held both of her hands. You asked the wrong question. She blinked. I did. He smiled. The answer has been yes since the day I fell in love with you. Tears slipped down Clara's cheeks. He took the ring, carefully slid it onto her finger, then kissed her forehead. The ballroom exploded into applause. Daniel whistled. Mia cried without embarrassment. Even Chairman Whitmore smiled as he wiped the corner of his eye. Outside, snowflakes drifted quietly beneath the city lights. Inside the ballroom, Clara looked at the ring on her finger, then at Ethan. She laughed through happy tears. So, my fiancé? Ethan intertwined his fingers with hers. He smiled with all the warmth she had searched for over 3 years. No. He gently lifted her hand and kissed the ring once more. From today, I'm your future husband. And for the first time in a very long time, neither of them had to wait anymore. The engagement banquet ended with laughter. By the next morning, every business newspaper carried the same headline. Whitmore Group CEO publicly proposed to her former assistant. The internet exploded. Some people called it unbelievable. Others called it the most romantic business story of the year. Inside Whitmore Group, no one was surprised anymore. The only question employees cared about was when's the wedding? At 9 o'clock sharp, Ethan walked into Clara's office carrying 2 cups of coffee. He stopped halfway. The office was empty. Her chair was pushed back. The lights were still on. He frowned. Clara? Mia appeared at the doorway with a stack of folders. Looking for CEO? He nodded. She left early. Board meeting. Mia smiled mysteriously. No. Then where did she go? You'll find out in 5 minutes. Before Ethan could ask another question, Mia handed him a small envelope. She asked me to give this to you. He opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note. Come downstairs. Don't ask questions. He laughed. That definitely sounds like her. 5 minutes later, he stepped into the underground parking garage. The space was almost empty. Only one silver SUV waited near the exit. Clara leaned casually against the driver's door. She wasn't wearing a business suit. Instead, she wore jeans, white sneakers, and a cream-colored sweater. Her long hair rested naturally over her shoulders. She looked younger, freer, almost like the university student she never had the chance to be. Ethan smiled. I almost didn't recognize you. She opened the passenger door. Good. Why? Today I'm not your CEO. So, who are you? She looked at him with a playful smile. I'm your fiancé. An hour later, the city disappeared behind them. The highway became quiet. Snow covered the distant mountains. Ethan looked out the window. Where are we going? It's a surprise. I've learned that your surprises are dangerous. She laughed. They usually will involve rings. Fair point. After another 20 minutes, Clara turned onto a narrow country road. Finally, the car stopped. In front of them stood a small white house surrounded by pine trees. It wasn't luxurious. It wasn't grand. It looked warm, peaceful, home. Ethan looked at her. Whose house is this? Ours. He blinked. What? She reached into her bag and handed him a key. I bought it 8 months ago. He stared at the little brass key in his palm. You bought a house before we were even together? She nodded. I hoped. You hoped. I hoped one day you'd come home here with me. His throat tightened. She unlocked the front door. The house smelled of fresh wood and coffee. Everything inside was simple. A fireplace, bookshelves, a long dining table, a cozy kitchen, large windows overlooking a frozen lake. Then Ethan noticed something. On one wall hung several framed sketches. One showed a kitchen, another a little garden, another a nursery. He turned slowly. Clara. She looked suddenly embarrassed. I drew those. You plan a nursery? Maybe. When? A long time ago. He walked closer. One sketch showed a little girl running across the yard holding both her parents' hands. Above the drawing in tiny handwriting were the words, home. Ethan stood perfectly still. You planned all this. She smiled shyly. I told you I wasn't good at confessing. So I kept preparing instead. She walked to the kitchen cabinet, opened the top drawer. Inside lay dozens of neatly folded recipes, each one labeled, Ethan's favorite pancakes, less cinnamon coffee, Sunday breakfast. He laughed in disbelief. You even learned to cook. I burned a lot of pans. I can imagine. She smiled. I wanted our mornings to smell like coffee and weekends to smell like pancakes. He looked around again. Everything in this little house had been built around a future she wasn't even sure would happen. A future with him. Snow began falling outside. Clara lit the fireplace. Warm orange light filled the living room. She sat on the rug, patting the empty space beside her. Ethan joined her. For a while, they simply watched the fire. Then Clara asked quietly, Can I ask something? Anything. When you resigned, were you really going to disappear? He looked into the flames. I thought it would be kinder. To whom? You? She frowned. I never asked you to disappear. I know. I just thought seeing me every day after your engagement would hurt too much. She leaned her head gently against his shoulder. It would have hurt me more. He turned toward her. She smiled softly. You leaving? Not because I needed an assistant. She intertwined her fingers with his. Because I needed you. The afternoon slipped by peacefully. They cooked lunch together, or rather, Ethan cooked. Clara attempted to help. She somehow managed to crack an egg onto the floor twice. Ethan laughed so hard he had to lean against the counter. This is sabotage. It was an accident. You missed the bowl. It moved. The bowl moved. It looked at me strangely. He couldn't stop laughing. She folded her arms dramatically. You're laughing at your future wife. I'm laughing because she's adorable. Her cheeks turned pink. You keep saying that. Because it's true. She reached for a little bit of flour. Before he noticed, she tapped it lightly against his nose. He froze. Did you just declare war? She took one careful step backward. Maybe. 3 seconds later, the kitchen was covered in flour. Two perfectly respectable adults were chasing each other around the island. When Ethan finally caught her, both of them were laughing too hard to stand. He wrapped his arms gently around her waist. She looked up at him. Their laughter slowly faded. Outside, snowflakes drifted silently past the windows. Inside, the house was warm, comfortable, peaceful, exactly like the sketches on the wall. Clara touched his cheek lightly. You know, Ethan, this house finally looks right. He smiled. Because I'm here. She nodded. No, because she leaned forward until their foreheads touched. You're home. Ethan closed his eyes for a brief moment, then whispered, I think you've had this dream much longer than I have. She smiled. I've just been waiting for you to walk through the front door. He kissed her forehead gently. I'm sorry I took so long. She shook her head. You came. That's all that matters. As the fire crackled softly beside them, neither noticed the snow growing heavier outside. For the first time, the little White House was no longer waiting for its family. It had finally welcomed them home. Snow fell all night. By morning, the city had turned white. Inside the little house by the lake, Ethan woke before sunrise. He quietly slipped out of bed. The wedding wasn't until noon, but somehow he couldn't sleep anymore. He stood by the kitchen window making coffee. His hands were steady. His heart wasn't. Behind him came a sleepy voice. You promised. Ethan turned around. Clara stood at the bedroom door in oversized pajamas, rubbing her eyes. You said you wouldn't leave the bed before I woke up. He smiled apologetically. I was making coffee. She walked over without another word, then wrapped both arms around his waist from behind, resting her cheek against his back. So, make it later. He laughed softly. The guests will arrive soon. I know the makeup artist is coming. I know the wedding planner. I know. She tightened her embrace. But for 5 more minutes, I just want you. Ethan covered her hands with his own. 5 minutes. She smiled. Deal. For those 5 quiet minutes, nothing in the world existed except the smell of coffee and the warmth of the person they loved. By noon, the chapel overlooking the frozen lake was filled with guests. Whitmore Group executives occupied the first rows. Daniel sat beside Mia. Chairman Whitmore adjusted his glasses every 30 seconds. You've checked the time 9 times. Daniel whispered. I'm checking whether my granddaughter changes her mind. Daniel laughed. Trust me. If anything, she's been waiting for this day longer than Ethan has. The old man smiled to himself. I know. Ethan stood at the end of the aisle. His hands were clasped in front of him. He had faced billion-dollar negotiations. He had presented to international investors. He had never been this nervous. Daniel leaned over. Relax. I can't. You look like you're about to resign again. Ethan laughed. Please don't remind me. Then the music began. Everyone stood. The chapel doors slowly opened. For a brief second, no one breathed. Clara appeared in a simple ivory wedding gown. No extravagant diamonds. No dramatic veil. Just timeless elegance. She held a small bouquet of white roses. When her eyes found Ethan, she smiled. Exactly the same smile she had worn the first day he walked into her office. The same smile he had secretly fallen in love with. She took one step, then another, walking slowly toward him. Ethan couldn't look anywhere else. The world quietly disappeared until only Clara remained. When she finally reached him, neither spoke immediately. The officiant smiled. I've officiated many weddings. I'd never seen a groom forget to breathe. The guests laughed. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. I think I forgot how. Clara laughed. Too. Good. Now we're even. The ceremony began. The officiant looked toward Clara first. Ms. Whitmore, years ago this man resigned because he believed you were marrying someone else. Soft laughter echoed through the chapel. The officiant smiled. Would you like to answer the question he never had the chance to ask? Clara turned toward Ethan. Her eyes became gentle. You once asked yourself who I was marrying. She took both of his hands. Her fingers were slightly cold. Her smile wasn't. Now you have your answer. She looked directly into his eyes. I wasn't waiting for a perfect man. I wasn't waiting for a billionaire. I wasn't waiting for someone my family approved. I was waiting for the man who remembered my coffee. Who carried medicine in his pocket, who stayed late because he worried I hadn't eaten, who thought loving me quietly was enough. A tear slipped down Ethan's cheek. Clara gently wiped it away. So, the answer has always been the same. I'm marrying you. The officiant turned toward Ethan. And you? He smiled through tears. When I met Clara, I thought she lived in a world I'd never belonged to, but she kept opening the door again and again and again until I finally understood. He looked at her. Home was never a place. It was wherever she was. He reached into his pocket. Instead of taking out the wedding ring first, he took out a folded piece of paper yellowed with age. Clara blinked. My resignation letter. He nodded. I kept it. She laughed through tears. Why? To remind myself how close I came to losing the best thing that ever happened to me. He slowly tore the paper into tiny pieces. The fragments drifted gently to the floor. This time, I'm not leaving ever. The officiant smiled warmly. I believe we're finally ready. Ethan picked up the ring. His hands no longer trembled. He placed it gently onto Clara's finger. Fits. I measured your ring while you were sleeping. She looked at him in mock surprise. So, that's why it disappeared for one afternoon. I panicked. You were adorable. I wasn't. You always are. The guests laughed again. Clara picked up the second ring, slid it onto his finger, then whispered so softly only he could hear. You don't have to resign anymore. He smiled. I know. I'm already exactly where I belong. The officiant raised his voice. By the authority vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Ethan looked at Clara as if asking permission. She answered by stepping closer. Very gently, she kissed him. Not because hundreds of people were watching, not because tradition demanded it. Because she had wanted to do that for 3 very long years. Applause filled the chapel. Mia cried openly. Daniel whistled loudly. Chairman Whitmore secretly wiped away a tear before pretending to cough. Outside, snow continued to fall. That evening, after every guest had gone home, Ethan and Clara returned to Whitmore Group. The building was dark. Only one office light remained on. Clara led him inside. She walked directly to the desk where months ago he had placed his resignation letter. She rested her hand on the polished wood. Do you remember this day? I remember everything. So do I. She smiled. I thought if you walked out that door, I'd spend the rest of my life regretting it. He stepped closer. You came after me. I would have chased you to the end of the world. He laughed. I believe you. She intertwined her fingers with his, then looked toward the city lights beyond the window. You know what? I almost thanked Daniel. Ethan raised an eyebrow. For pretending to be your fiancé. She nodded. Without him, you might never have gotten jealous. He smiled. I hated him for exactly 3 days. And now I should probably buy him dinner. She laughed. I'll tell him. They stood together by the window. The same office. The same city. The same 2 people. But everything had changed. Months ago, Ethan had walked into this room believing it was the end. Tonight, he stood there as Clara's husband. The man she had quietly chosen long before either of them found the courage to speak. Outside, snowflakes drifted through the night. Inside, Clara rested her head lightly against his shoulder. Ethan. HM? Do you know what my favorite day is? Our wedding. She shook her head with a smile. The day you resigned. He looked at her in disbelief. What? Because she reached up and gently straightened his tie just as she had done hundreds of times in her imagination. It was the day you finally made me brave enough to stop pretending. Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders. And my favorite day. She looked up. The day an Ice Queen CEO tore up my resignation letter and asked me. He smiled, eyes full of warmth. If you leave, who am I supposed to marry? Clara laughed. So, who did I marry? He leaned down until their foreheads touched. You married the man who was always yours. She closed her eyes. You married the woman who had already loved you for 3 years. Outside, the snow fell softly across the sleeping city. Inside the office where their story had almost ended, it quietly became the place where forever began. That's all for today. Remember to subscribe and support us.